on build of the deck, where instead of Sidisi, you have Siege Rhino, which a little bit less in the way of moving parts. Also, not a bad thing to bring back with Whip of Erebos.
Yeah. So they're both playing Obs on Reanimator, but this is still a pretty new archetype. And when you look at the players' builds of this, they're pretty different here. Cedric is taking a more conservative route, trying to beat down on aggro with cards like Doomwake Giant in his deck. That's going to be difficult, though, as his matchup against Mani. If you know anything about Mani, he is not a player who's scared to make bold decisions with his mana base, and that is certainly true today, playing a full 4 copies of Wingmate Rock, as well as some copies of Soul of Theros.
And if you imagine the field is going to be very mid-range, which in light of the Players' Championship, World Championship makes a lot of sense, you can get away with more greed in your mana base because you have more time to draw out of it. The linear beatdown decks of the format have really fallen by the wayside. There's not a lot of that going on anymore, and so players can afford to be a little bit greedier with their mana bases.
Yeah, turn 1 Thoughtseize from Mani takes care of Fleece Mainline out of Cedric's hand. Cedric was on the play. Mani is on 6 cards, so they're on an even number here. As we'll pass back over to Cedric for the second turn.
And this is Cedric's first time playing the deck, period, end of sentence. No reps with this thing, so. And this deck's fairly complicated, so you may see some patience from him in his turns. Does not want to mess anything up, especially being on camera with me, part of the calling the match.
Yeah, he did have the option to make a turn 2 Satyr Wayfinder there. And it's tough with this mana base, so many things come into play tapped. You see these temples, Sandstep Citadel. He had the option between a turn 2 Satyr Wayfinder or a turn 3 Courser of Krufix, but he couldn't have them both because those lands coming into play tapped. Turns out there he's going to go with the Courser.
There's also no rush to get the Wayfinder into play in this matchup. It's not like he's in the market for attackers and blockers that early in the game, so he can wait until later to resolve that card. The Courser has higher upside in the short term, so it makes more sense for Cedric here to make sure he can get this into play.
Yeah, Courser of Krufix is the play for Cedric. It will reveal a Temple of Silence. Go back over to Mani. Mani seems to be pretty heavy full up on lands. He does have a copy of Siege Rhino in his hand, but no play as the Courser will go unchecked.
Siege Rhino, an important card, but also not too hard to get off the table. Whip is the real prize of the matchup. Not a lot of ways to get off the table. In fact, Cedric's main deck has 0 ways of removing Whip of Erebos. And on my side, it is also 0.
Yeah, they both have a 1 of Reclamation Sage, but they don't have any way to find the Reclamation Sage. It's not a Court of Calling deck, so they really have to mise into it. They do have some copies. Well, on Cedric's side, he has 2 copies of Commune with the Gods. So if he needs to find a Reclamation Sage, he'll be much better at doing that than Mani will.
Yeah. But it is an interesting thing about this format. Whip of Erebos all over the place, and decks in game 1 still really not set up to get it off the table.
Yeah, second Courser of Krufix from Cedric. He'll attack in for 2. He has Mani down to 15. And when you talk about the late game, you said, Whip is a really important card here. There's some things on Mani's side that I actually would look at, which seem like they're also hard for Cedric to deal with. And what I'm looking at is 2 copies of Hornet Queen and 4 copies of Wingmate Rock.
Well, Hornet Queen is still the best card to have in these mid-range matchups. It's not easy to get off the table efficiently, and it's a great reanimation target. Wingmate Rock, not quite as good as Hornet Queen, but much of the same. Really hard to remove it for value and a solid reanimation target.
Now, how do you feel about that Cedric's inclusion then of main deck Doomwake Giants? It actually gives him some game, I would think, against Hornet Queen.
And you can set up some combos with, casting Doomwake Giant, getting a Courser out of your graveyard, or casting a Whip. I think Doomwake is a reasonable card to have, just in terms of trying to fight the Hornet Queen battles.
Siege Rhino is the play from Mani. It's going to bring him back up to 17 and Cedric to 18, so it equalizes on life totals. But the card advantage train here continues for Cedric as he gets a free Urborg off the top, which will gain him up to 20 thanks to the pair of Coursers. That's 2 free cards from the Coursers right now.
Though Cedric's still very light on action.
Yeah, Satyr Wayfinder. He's going to play that. You see, he waited until he had a land. There was a Landmar Waste on top of his deck to play the Satyr, so that's going to reset the top of his deck. Give him a new chance at drawing something there. Takes a Plains. And, well, not too much. Sylvan Caryatid is the next card on top. That's right, yeah, Cedric with 4 creatures in play now. A Caryatid, a Satyr Wayfinder, and 2 Coursers. Yeah, he has pretty well, his board's developed, but you're right, he doesn't have that haymaker that he might otherwise be looking for.
He's got nothing going on. I think his hand is just more mana at this point, so. Even though he has generated a lot of card advantage, the lands kind of only count if he starts doing something with them.
Right, and Monty actually knows the score there. Remember, he had that turn 1 Thoughtseize, and because Cedric played a Courser so early, Monty has fairly good information on what's in Cedric's hand. Siege Rhino will attack, and Monty will cast Reclamation Sage. That's the one of. It takes care of one of Cedric's Courser of Kruvix. And draws the carry added. Cedric has a Temple on top, so it looks like he'll net another free card here. And this looks to be Hornet Queen. Plays a fetch land, is able to tap it thanks to an Urborg. And there was one payoff waiting in his hand. Like you said, here's this Hornet Queen. That since Monty's deck is the one without Doomwake Giants, I think this is going to be a pretty big prize.
For sure. And yeah, as you mentioned, there's no clean way for Monty to get this off the table. He has access to his own copies, but he only has 2, and that's not necessarily an answer.
Yeah, that's his best answer. That's his best, I guess, quote unquote, answer to it, isn't it?
Yep.
Attack from Seder Wayfinder. Monty will trade the Reclamation Sage with the Wayfinder.
The Reclamation Sage can't attack at this point, and it serves a use being in the graveyard and being a whip target. So I like Monty taking the trade there.
It does look like Monty has his own copy of Hornet Queen in hand, but he doesn't have the mana to cast it just yet. Plays the Seder Wayfinder of his own. It will mill Whip of Erebos and Siege Rhino. Monty opts to take a Temple of Silence. And of note right now, Monty only has 3 green sources. Well, that's enough. But he only has 6 mana, so he's still 1 short of Hornet Queen. We don't know if he has a 7th untapped.
So I like this from Cedric. Doesn't want to draw the land at this point, certainly has more than enough mana to function with, so
yeah,
get a fresh look at it by sacking the Windswept Heath.
Pays life to do so, but gains it back thanks to Courser of Kruvix, so Cedric will remain at 16 life.
Look at Cedric's smooth operations. It's been a while since he's been in the feature match area, but he's still got it.
Right now, not too much action in his hand, but Cedric is ahead on the board thanks to Hornet Queen.
A little uncertainty about Cedric's sports team of choice, as he has on a Cavaliers shirt, a Blue Jays hat, and a Golden State Warriors jacket.
Yeah, those are all right next to each other, right? That makes sense. Yeah, I can't link those ones together.
They all feature the color blue, so he matches,
okay,
which is
so
nice.
He's a fan of blue sports teams.
A man of the people. Doesn't want to be too much on any one given thing.
Well, Llanowar Waste is the top card of his deck, so yet another land. But that will be the 4th extra card from Courser of Kruvix if he chooses to play it.
And I can't imagine why not.
Yeah, that unchecked Courser, it seems to me like the unsung hero of this game for Cedric.
Yeah, when you just count up the number of resources each player is working with, it seems like Cedric's ahead even though he hasn't really done anything besides this Hornet Queen. And a lot of that can be chalked up to the Courser.
You see there comes the Llanowar Waste, gains life. Yet another land on top. You see Cedric, little smile at that one there. At least that next one will be a Temple. It's a copy of Temple of Silence. But he takes his Air Superiority in. That's 6 damage from Hornet Queen. Does Monty have the 7th land to answer back?
Keep in mind, Monty has only got 1 copy of Whip of Erebos left in his deck. He has 2 in his main deck, and 1 got flipped over on that Wayfinder trigger. So Cedric, with 3 whips left in his deck, is better suited to playing a long attrition battle than Monty is at this point. So even if the board's at relative parity, I think Cedric has an edge here, because I believe the first person who finds Whip of Erebos is going to have an enormous advantage.
Monty going to go ahead and crack Windswept Heath. Interestingly, he doesn't have to crack fetch lands at this point because of Cedric's copy of Urborg.
And if he's taking this much time to go through his deck, has he flipped over all of his planes and okay, never mind.
Yeah,
to say
he has 2 of each in his deck.
That is really rough if
if he had the option to tap it and then didn't. But he's going to be a Hornet Queen of Mani's own, and it looks like hiding out in Mani's hand is his second copy of Whip of Erebos. So if that's the case, this might be just what Mani needed to stabilize.
Yeah. So there's a very good chance Cedric here just offers up a big trade.
Yeah, Hornet Queen from Mani. So we'll see what he's going to do here. Well, certainly you think he'll offer up that trade. Another Hornet Queen now waiting on top. Course of Kruvix helping Cedric to slog through all those lands, finally reaches the prize.
It does make a trade more attractive. The flip side of this is Cedric having access to Doomwake Giant in his deck, and this game settling up to be a long one, means there is an argument for Cedric just letting the board develop with Hornet tokens on both sides and eventually drawing a Doomwake Giant.
Yeah, he has Doomwakes. He has 3 whips. He doesn't know Mani's deck list, but it's unlikely Mani has 4. So Cedric has to think he's even or ahead on the number of whips left in the deck. He has Doomwakes. If I'm Cedric, I would think that the late game favors me.
So the natural instinct here is just to attack and trade off and whatever. But I do think in Cedric's position, there's an argument for just sitting tight, maybe trying to trade with the Rhino with one of your tokens, or more likely Mani just says go in the event that he can't get your Hornet Queens off the table, and wait for a Doomwake Giant to clean up all the tokens that Mani has.
Right. There's some danger in waiting. I think this is what Cedric's going to think about here, is that while he might top deck better than Mani, which is kind of, I think, what you're alluding to, right? Cedric has a better deck right now.
Yes.
Mani still has cards left in his hand, and Cedric doesn't really know what those are. Those could be, Mani could have a whip in his hand, Mani could have a Soul of Theros in his hand. There's a lot of cards here that make trading more attractive. So a card like Thoughtseize would actually be a nice draw for Cedric right now, so that he could maybe be more informed about this decision.
Yep. And it looks like Cedric is just going to hold tight here for a moment and not attack. Which I think ultimately is the play I would have made as well. I think that if I'm in Cedric's seat, I feel like I'm probably drawing better than Mani. And especially because Doomwake Giants are in the deck, there's a big incentive to just hold tight, don't attack, let the board build up, and then clean up everything on Mani's side, or at least a lot of Mani's action.
Sure. And it looks like you're absolutely right. That's what it looks like what he's going to go for. And we'll go back over to Mani's side. Does he want to offer a trade? It's a lot scarier for him when he's at 7 life. Mani will swing Siege Rhino, and if I'm Cedric, this sounds like a whip.
So that's a really nice double block there from Cedric too. The reason that he wants to double block in that spot, even though it looks a little bit weird, is because Siege Rhino has trample. So if he says blocks with just 1 token or just the Hornet Queen, and Mani has a removal spell for the blocker, Cedric takes all the damage and the Siege Rhino doesn't go anywhere. So Cedric's giving up a little bit there by blocking with the second creature, but ensuring that he actually gets the Siege Rhino off the table.
Yeah, now there's not too much removal in Mani's deck. He has 5 kill spells, I believe. But you're right, that is ensuring that it dies. Go back over to Cedric's side. And he did have a lot of extra life to work with as he makes his second Hornet Queen. It's not like that extra creature really mattered.
I'm sure Cedric would like to keep it, but given the way the game's shaping up, Cedric's life total is, I mean, it's high, but he definitely doesn't want to take 4 there for no reason.
Right. Draw from Mani was Wingmate Rock. Looks like Mani has a copy of Llanowar Wastes, Murderous Cut, and Wingmate Rock, so he may not have had that Whip of Erebos. Top card for Cedric is a Hero's Downfall. Mani's going to swing Hornet Queen, Cedric takes it, and then here comes Wingmate Rock, bringing another 3/4 with it.
And Cedric is loath to put the Hornet Queen in the graveyard there. He wants that to stay in play as much as possible because he doesn't want Mani to whip that back. So, again, I really like the patience that Cedric's showing here.
Yeah, Mani's down to 4. There is a threat here with Wingmate Rock, which is that if Mani gets to attack next turn, Wingmate Rock will actually gain him a lot of life with that Swarm of Hornets.
Well, Cedric's picking up a downfall this turn, so he always has the option of getting out of that if he so chooses. But the Wingmate Rock in play is a bit dangerous. I suspect Cedric will kill it straight away for the reasons that you mentioned. And it was only a matter of time before Cedric started drawing gas, Right. He was drawing so much mana off of his draw steps and coursers, and now he's found some high impact draws over the last couple turns.
And that really, to me, just shows Courser seems like such an important card in this matchup. Both decks play so few removal spells that Courser, it netted Cedric 4 cards here. That's, well, not only just 4 cards, he also got to strategically crack fetch lands. So you could argue that it was worth 5 cards here.
And then in a situation where Cedric's draw was not very good initially, I mean, he needed the extra help here.
Draw for turn is Hero's Downfall. You see the next top card. It's Satyr Wayfinder.
And Cedric's here pausing before he draws because he still has a Windswept Heath available. So if he wanted a different draw than the Hero's Downfall, he has that option. I think Downfall is a good card to draw here because of the Wingmate Rock. But he does have the option of doing something else.
Temple Silence from Cedric. Pretty big upgrade there. He's going to scry that Satyr Wayfinder to the bottom, and Murderous Cut is the new top card. Certainly an improvement.
Yeah, and just the removal spells here are great in helping Cedric finish off this game.
Hero's Downfall on Wingmate Rock. And now it looks like Cedric is to go on the attack. Monty's at 4.
Yeah, so Cedric is just being cautious here, making sure that nothing too bad happens on the way back. I imagine he's going to unleash a pretty big attack here. I don't think there's a lot of value in leaving things back on defense at this stage because Cedric can't beat a Doomwake Giant regardless if that happens to be in Monty's deck. So I think he's better served just getting in the damage that he can.
Yeah, with Cedric playing his own Doomwake Giants, he has to be concerned that Monty might also be playing them. Now, we know Monty is not. However, yeah, Hornet Queen is so... You can be so confident with your combat math on it, right? Every card just being a Death Touch flyer just gives them this universal ability to trade.
It does simplify things.
Yeah, it's like, well, they're all going to take creatures with them.
Definitely, what's the worst thing that can happen? Alpha Strike here out of Cedric.
So Cedric swings with 9 creatures. Monty only... He's looking at his blockers here. He only has 6 blockers. So I was going to say he's going to have to block everything. He's going to Murderous Cut a Hornet token. You know things have gotten grim when that starts to be your play.
You see why this is the best card in the mirror match. It's really not even that close.
And block everything else, go to 1. Cedric is left with 3 Hornets. Monty with just a Queen. And we'll see what can he hit. And I was going to say it's another copy of Hornet Queen. It's a copy of Soul of Theros. Now this card, if you played M15, certainly one of the all-stars of M15 Limited, if not the best, but never really made a splash in Constructed. Monty's choosing not to show that card, and he's going to wait for next game.
This is a really important card because Soul of Theros is for winning Hornet Queen mirror matches. I saw this for the first time in Atlanta last week, where First Strike and +2/+2 really prevents Hornets from being able to be effective blockers. It's a pretty big, powerful creature on its own right, and there's going to be some games against random decks where this goes unchecked and you just win. But this is primarily about fighting Hornet Queen, because +2/+2 and First Strike means that 1/1 Death Touchers are no longer effective blockers.
Yeah, this guy has the ability, so he's very expensive in that you have to play him for 6, and you really have to activate him the next turn. But in most matchups, if you can do both of those things, if you have enough time to play him and then activate him, it's very hard to lose from that board state. I would say if you're playing against aggro or in a mid-range mirror, both those plays are excellent. Maybe a control deck can deal with a hit from this guy, but that's about it.
Exactly, and like I said, there's all little scenarios that come up where this card's good, and its floor is still pretty high because it's a 6/6 Vigilance for 6 with their powers. But this card is primarily a concession to Hornet Queen. That's why it's popped up a little bit in these Obzon decks, trying to fight people who, whether it's the mirror match, whether it's Sultai, they're trying to beat them with Hornet Queen, which is, in many people's minds, the best way of fighting Obzon Game 1.
So why do you think, if that card, I mean, Soul of Theros was really an undeniably powerful card. Why has it taken so long for us to see this card in Standard?
I think that the Souls have kind of gotten a bad rep in general because they were supposed to be the new Titans. They've obviously fallen short of that. And I think that, there's only so many copies of the card you can play in the first place. Even if you think it's going to be good in the metagame, it's not something you can play 3 copies of because of the mana cost and its diminishing returns. But I think people have started to identify it as one of, in protracted games, with similar tools, which are what the Abzan mid-range or the Sultai matchups are like, it is one of the better ways of fighting Hornet Queen. Maybe the best way. Cedric's analog is Doomwave Giant. It's a card that's pretty good on its own, and it's good against Hornet Queen. So both players are aware that this is the card they need to beat, but they're approaching it in different ways.
All right, so I'm going to go to the sideboard. I'm going to start on Mani Davoudi's side. So he's down a game right here. Looking at his sideboard, the kind of cards I would want, it seems like this is truly a Hornet Queen battle. The cards that I'm really excited about in his sideboard are cards like, he has 2 copies of his own Doomwake Giant. He has 2 copies of Utter End to deal with Whip of Erebos. I'd be excited about any of those. And then there's a lot of cards that I think are possible options. I think he wants his last Thoughtseize. He has, and tell me about these ones. Ajani, Mentor of Heroes, Nissa, Worldwaker, Pharika, God of Affliction. These are kind of tap-out good cards, but are they better than cards like Wingmate Rock or Soul of Theros?
I think that Ajani, Mentor of Heroes, is very good in the matchup. I question Nissa because attacking on the ground is really hard to do. Generating 4/4s against decks that are playing Siege Rhinos and Hornet Queens isn't always the best thing to be doing. But the Ajani generating a bunch of card advantage, as we saw from Cedric Game 1 with the Corsair Crew fix, the selection that Ajani provides, I think that's definitely coming in. The Nissa I'm questionable about. I think the Pharika is very good here. It's another source of death touch. In this matchup, the board builds up, so you do achieve devotion. And it's a way of mucking up with Cedric's graveyard as well, so his Whip of Erebos is a lot less effective. So the Reclamation Stage, the Doomwake Giants, I think those are great to bring in. Reclamation Stage is another answer to Whip, Doomwake Giant to fight Hornet Queen. The Bioblights, I think, because of Hornet Queen and the fact that he saw Fleece Maid line are likely to come in here as well. The 2 Utter Ends, the Pharika, and the Ajani. So
I'm looking at cards I don't like. 4 Wingmate Rock seems kind of excessive here. Mani played one and it wasn't all that good that game. Can Satyr, Wayfinder, Elvish Mystic, you may not need a full 8 from those guys. And I mean, and I'm gonna say this, like, do we talk about cutting Siege Rhino? I mean, that seems almost sacrilegious for the deck. It's the best, it's so good in Standard right now.
I think it's one of the lower impact cards in the mirror match. I mean, Mani had a Siege Rhino and it showed up, it attacked a few times, but the game ultimately wasn't about that. I think that you don't need all the mana because the game goes on for a very long time and your elves are not gonna get killed. So you could probably shave out a little bit of that, and I do think you can cut some number of the Siege Rhinos as well. Even though, as you mentioned, it does seem sacrilegious, but in this matchup, it's about bigger and more powerful stuff than that. I would still want some copies in the deck because it's a powerful card, it's good with Whip, but I could see going down to 3 being an easy decision.
It does look like out of Cedric's board, he may not have as many tools.
He has an Utter End, a Pharika, 3 Drowned Sorrow, 2 Glare of Heresy, a Reclamation Sage, 2 Abzan Shards, 3 Thoughtseize with 0 in the main, and 2 Nissa Worldwaker. I like the 3 Thoughtseizes, the Abzan Charms, the Reclamation Sage, the Pharika, and the Utter End. Much of the same sideboarding.
So what's Abzan Charm? That's something Mani didn't have. Why is it so good in this matchup?
Well, exiling is very powerful, and it's a good answer to Pharika. The games go on for a long time, so even though 3 mana to draw 2 is not the most efficient rate, I would try to get my hands on all the divinations I could in this kind of matchup.
Sure.
And the other modes provide utility as well. So
actually interesting. So the draw 2, lose 2 is one of the prime choices in this matchup.
I think it will come up to make land drops or define your high impact stuff. But the game goes on it's a slow matchup, as we saw. It goes on for a really long time. It took Cedric, 9, 10 turns, maybe more to win that game. In games like that, it's nice to have access to just more card drawing, even if it's not the best rate.
Yeah.
Cedric eventually won game 1 on the back of the card advantage from Corsairs, and I would want to try to amplify that if I could.
All right, game 2 underway. This time both players on 7. Starting out with pretty decent mana here. Both of them have a turn 2 Sylvan Carry added. For Mani, that will turn into a turn 3 Courser. He nets his first free card this time off of Llanowar Wastes on the top of the deck. And you see Whip of Erebos waiting on top.
Now keep in mind, post-board, the game has a much different character to it because both players can interact with Whip of Erebos, whereas game 1, we're looking at just the Reclamation Sage. Players can't lean on it as much post-board. There's more Utter Ends floating around. Each player has a Pharika to mess with the other player's graveyard. And so Whip of Erebos is still potent, but probably goes down in value some amount post-board, as it's no longer as untouchable as it is game 1.
Totally agree. We'll see what Cedric's answer to this is. And it's almost interesting how you see players settle into this matchup. It's like, so say Mani had an option between Siege Rhino on turn 3 there and Courser trying to net a free card. It's not even clear he would go for the Siege Rhino just because of how much they're settling in for this long trenches fight.
Exactly. The idea that Mani plays a turn 3 Siege Rhino, it goes unchecked, attacks Cedric 5 times and kills him. basically impossible. That's not a thing that's happening in this matchup. So I think Monty is better served getting the card advantage set up first and waiting about attacking for turns down the line.
And then I think we're going to see just that play out. It's going to be board presence versus card advantage. You see here, Monty is going to play a whip and a tap land, so he has the Courser. That's the card advantage. Cedric did have the turn 3 Siege Rhino on his side, so he has the board presence. And we'll get to see them play out against each other. Now, to be sure, Monty has Whip of Erebos. That will really demand an answer on Cedric's side.
At least, probably some turns down the line, at least for the time being. Monty has no graveyard, and as far as Cedric knows, no means of putting anything into the graveyard. So yeah. The whip doesn't have to be dealt with immediately, but in the long term, Cedric does have to answer it.
Monty doesn't have any really huge creatures threatening to gain a lot of life. He has a Courser.
Yeah.
And going over to Cedric's side, swings in with the Siege Rhino. Monty go to 15, and now Cedric's gonna have some card advantage of his own. He has a Courser again. He nets his first free card. That's Wooded Foothills, revealing an Abzan Charm.
Good turn here for Cedric, and now he has both a board and at least for the time being, a commiserate source of card advantage, though Monty's Reclamation Sage that he's drawing next turn might mess that up.
And that'll be interesting to see how Monty plays Reclamation Sage. There's a lot of advantage to just casting it and getting a target for it. At the same time, if Monty doesn't care as much about the Courser, he could save it for a card like Whip.
It's a question of, is the matchup about these sort of tempo plays, like Reclamation Sage on the Courser, or does that Reclamation Sage just have to be saved for Whip of Erebos or something else that's higher impact?
Yeah, just how important, right? How much is this about Whip? And this will be really interesting. So Cedric cracked his fetch land, got a forge, and the top card is Whip of Erebos. So now Monty has a real decision on how to play that Reclamation Sage. Waiting in the wings as a Siege Rhino for Monty. And I think one of the things I really like about these mid-range mirrors is when both players have a Courser, how much of like this chess match it becomes, because both players are more or less playing with perfect information the whole time.
Yep.
So it's not... Yeah, it's a little more chessy, and right? There's not hidden information. You both get to see what's going on.
Exactly. The last time I can remember things like this occurring, I guess Wandering Eye in Mercadian Mask Limited, both players played with their hands revealed. You had sort of the same chess, like, we have all the information right now. And in some very long Courser mirror matches, the same thing can happen, where both players know each other's hand the whole game.
Isn't Zer's weirding? Doesn't that do it to both players?
Yeah, but Zer's weirding is only showing up. Zer's weirding is only showing up if you're locking someone. So
no one plays that card fairly.
No one's ever just put a Zer's weirding into play and see what happens. That's not how that card works.
I know it sounds crazy. That's the kind of card I've actually put in decks before.
Oh, I have too.
Yeah.
That's my kind of. This might be where our tastes overlap. Is Zer's weirding?
Yeah. It was part of, if you played Enduring Ideal, it was one of the pieces you could get to eventually make your opponent just miserable.
I like just casting it. Just casting it.
I can appreciate that. Not even comboing with it. Just be like, no, this is just, I'm going to just cast it, and we're going to both not draw anything. I'll have more life points. I'll play some life gain.
Have a Zern Orb in play, whatever,
All right, back over on the Monty's side. He did crack a fetch land. Well, he's going to cast a Siege Rhino here.
Yeah, that's just a big life swing here, doing this through the whip. So this is going to be a drain for 3, and then probably a drain for 4, as I imagine Cedric's not going to be blocking the Siege Rhino.
Yeah, sorry, the Siege Rhino, not cast, whipped out of the graveyard.
And you can see now why the game really isn't about getting out onto the board first. Is Cedric kind of had the initial aggression, the initial tempo, and one Whip of Erebos turn undid all of that.
Oh yeah, Monty's now up to 25. I mean, whipping a Siege Rhino is a 7-point, is a 10-point life swing. So yeah, Monty goes up to 25, Cedric down to 16, and it doesn't even seem like Monty has to care about Cedric's creatures right now. They don't seem to, they aren't gonna race. I don't know. They seem like they're playing very fair, and Monty doesn't seem like he's playing fair anymore.
Exactly. Cedric needs a trump at this point.
So Hornet Queen, or he can make it back into a fair game, right? If he blows up the whip, now we're playing real Magic again.
Exactly. Although, keep in mind, Monty still doesn't have a really stocked graveyard. So it's not, the whip is still not an immediate issue. Cedric's weathered the storm of the worst of it for the time being.
Now, there's an issue that, but what about this? If Cedric attacks, Monty gets to chump block with Satyr Wayfinder, and then he can whip Satyr Wayfinder to start this chain all over again.
He does have the option to do that, but that's really risky if Cedric has some way to blow up the whip.
Then he just loses a Satyr Wayfinder.
Then you're just down a Satyr Wayfinder. Not that that's worth very much, but it's still...
You'd rather have one than not have one.
Yeah.
Cedric netting another free card there. That's Llanowar Wastes off the top of his deck. And that is one thing Cedric does have going for him. He still has a 6-card hand right now.
Yeah.
As his coursers have done a great job both games of getting him a lot of extra cards.
Yeah. And now Cedric's deploying a whip of his own. And this is the turn that Cedric kind of has to take off. Now it's not a full, he doesn't fully take it off because he gets to gain some life in this exchange here, but
Satyr Wayfinder does chump block. And this is where these Abzan Reanimator mirror matches can get really out of control. So both players are just gaining life. Cedric gonna start stacking his own graveyard. This is his Satyr Wayfinder. It finds a land, it bins a Siege Rhino of his own. And now we'll see if anybody's life total is gonna move. Thoughtseize the draw from Mani. Would have been great a turn before. Right now, it seems like it's almost late to the party. He'll cast it anyway. Sees Murderous Cut, Reclamation Sage, Courser, 2 lands.
And Cedric developing the board last turn did not elect to Reclamation Sage the whip.
Yeah, Mani's going to Thoughtseize the Reclamation Sage. That doesn't totally get rid of it, as Cedric can whip it back into play to get rid of Mani's whip, but it means that Cedric only gets to cast it once instead of twice.
Well, there's some amount of risk if Mani has the ability to blow up Cedric's whip, which he does through this Reclamation Sage.
So now, taking care of the whip and the Sage means Mani, once again, is the only player with a whip. He's going to swing with Courser of Krufix.
And still has the Wayfinder in his graveyard. So Cedric probably is loath to attack at this point because he doesn't want Mani to put the Reclamation Sage in the graveyard. And if Cedric does nothing, Mani can get the Wayfinder back and get the ball rolling again.
He has more sources of pressure, so we'll see here. Cedric drawing Murderous Cut. Now has a lot of good removal. Satyr Wayfinder on top. Once again, removing things in the face of Whip of Erebos. This only buys you time, not really, doesn't move you ahead. See right now, Mani looking in a strong position. Will he be able to take it into 3 games?
There's still the question of if Mani has any real big thing to do with the whip just yet.
Yeah, I do believe Mani has a Hornet Queen in his hand.
And if that's the case, if that's able to get into play, then that certainly qualifies.
Yeah, he has 7 mana if you count that Sylvan Carry added. Cedric's going to try to do some damage in the face of that Whip of Erebos. Swinging with Courser of Krufix, Siege Rhino, and Satyr Wayfinder. Mani more than happy to trade off that Reclamation Sage. That means he can get it again with Whip of Erebos when he needs it.
And this might have been one of those, well, I'm not blocking, so I'm attacking sort of attacks from Cedric. It's not doing a lot, but it's greater than nothing, which is what saying go would do.
Draws Siege Rhino for Mani. Elvish Mystic on top. Was wondering if he had left those in. Courser swings for Mani. Cedric blocks with Courser, but that will net Mani 2 life. And as prescribed, it's now Hornet Queen for Zap Gaze. Be 4 Hornet tokens. And this Hornet plus Whip, this can be the cincher in these matchups.
Yep. I mean, Cedric still has access to his Doomweight Giants, but
he just has to blow up the Whip at this point, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And the Hornets. I mean, he needs to answer both.
Yeah, he has a lot of life points to work with. You see 23 there. So the Hornets aren't going to kill him that quickly. They will gain Mani a ton of life. So even if Cedric does stabilize and deal with Mani's board, he's then going to have a pretty long slog through all these life points.
Yeah.
If he's too far behind on life when he stabilizes, he won't really be able to effectively deal damage. Landmore Wastes on top of the deck. Cedric draws that. Next card is Cedric's own Hornet Queen. We saw a duel of Hornet Queens last game. This one's a little bit different. Mani's not playing fair in the dueling Hornet Queens.
Exactly. He has lifelink and the ability to get back the Hornet Queen if it ever dies. So he has total control over the damage race.
Right, if Cedric swings, Mani will probably opt to not block and race back. If Mani swings, Cedric will be forced to block, and then Mani can whip it back. So there's not... Cedric is behind both ways. But a land here, Cedric. Siege Rhino will trade with the Hornet Queen itself.
No hesitation from Mani to offer up that block.
You see Cedric does not want to lose Siege Rhino. He's going to Murderous Cut the Hornet Queen before damage, so the Rhino will trample over for 4.
And this is the sort of play I alluded to before of the single block against Siege Rhino occasionally being a little risky. Mani doesn't really care about taking that risk because he has so many resources to work with, and if the Hornet Queen goes to the graveyard, who even cares?
Great.
But
Mani might even want it there. Well, he did from that block. 4 Hornets will swing Cedric down to 21, Mani up to 22. Siege Rhino from Davoudi. And Elvish Mystic. Are there dangers of overcommitting here? We've talked a little bit about Doomwake Giant being in Cedric's deck.
well, the Elvish Mystic is sort of... It's not like that's worth very much to follow up with an Elvish Mystic after the fact, so I don't mind casting it.
Speaking of Doomwake Giant, there is one on top for Cedric.
And you saw a little nod of the head there from Cedric.
Plays his own Hornet Queen. And now things might get interesting. We'll see whether or not Mani actually wants to whip back his own Hornet Queen into that Doomwake Giant.
He's got to wait until he has a removal spell for the Doomwake to make that happen. Now with Utter End on top, what he can do is... I guess he's going
to mill it.
Not interested.
You see milling into Soul of Theros. Now, Soul of Theros activates for 6. So
Yeah.
if Mani waits until he has 10 mana, he can whip back Hornet Queen and leave up Soul of Theros.
And he's only a mana short right now, although that's likely to change because the Doomwake Giant's going to take care of the Elvish Mystic.
The Hornets attack. Siege Rhino joins the Hornets in attacking. Now, is there a chance here, looking at this board, because of Doomwake Giant, do you think, can Cedric power through this whip? You know, kill all of Mani's things twice, kill once, then kill them all twice, and then start dealing damage.
He can, but Mani gains so much life, and it's basically like Mani gets 2 draw steps a turn, one of which is guaranteed to be very good as long as Whip of Erebos is in play. So it is possible, but unlikely.
Both players, I would think if you're Cedric, a tough play here would be you have to be cognizant of the round clock. You know, do I want to try to win this game? Do I want to try to win game 3? Do I want to try to just see if I can get this game to go to time?
I think that Cedric's got enough of a chance to win this game, even though he's a little bit behind, that he should continue to play.
Okay. Do you think it's more likely that he wins this or that he just stalls it out if this happens? You know, like, not intentionally stalling it. What I mean is, these games can really go long.
I think the most likely scenario of this game, if I had to pick one, is Cedric loses inside of time.
Okay.
But I think there's enough possibility of the game being a draw. I think there's enough possibility that Cedric just wins that he should continue to play.
Yeah. All right, Doomwake Giant was cast there, and that's the play we were talking about. Mani not wanting to lose his team flash, well, use the graveyard ability on Soul of Theros to one-shot, give his team +2/+2 and lifelink. Now that's only a small reprieve. As soon as Cedric finds another enchantment, Mani's gonna lose his team.
Well, he knows the top card is a Hornet Queen, so there's at least a 1-turn reprieve, and Mani just going to take care of it with Murderous Cut anyway.
Yeah, and you see Mani now with his own Doomwake Giant as the draw. That's going to be a beating for him. Doomwake Giant now taking care of Cedric's Hornets.
Yeah, and now the writing's on the wall with that Murderous Cut
Yeah.
and that activation of the soul that Cedric's dead, and he lets that game go, which I like a lot.
He had a really good play in his own Doomwake when Mani had the answer to it. I think, yeah, it's the right time to pack it in. Cedric wants to get a third game off as Mani has evened things up.
Yep. Before the removal spell on the Doomweight Giant, there was enough hope that Cedric could keep playing there. But once that happens and the Doomwake's being drawn and there's another Doomwake on top, the writing's on the wall, let that game go and give yourself enough time to try to win a third game. Because neither one of these players wants to start off this tournament with a draw.
Yeah.
It's a long tournament, and also, the draw bracket's going to be a lot of this mirror match. And if you weren't able to finish it the first time, you're going to be playing against someone else who wasn't able to finish it the first time.
Yeah.
And then your draw might get another draw, and your tournament might be over before it even gets started. So,
one thing, these mirror, there sure are a lot of creatures in play in these matchups. Just cluttered on both sides.
But very few of them actually matter, so it helps to simplify the board a little bit.
And a pretty interesting back and forth there. It still seems like the fight is about whip at the end of the day. It's because at some point we thought, hey, maybe Cedric can power through this whip, but it does seem in the end the whip deck got it. The player who had the whip generated enough advantage that it didn't matter that Cedric was getting cards off the course of Krufix. Well, I mean, I guess it did matter, but the whip was able to overpower all of that. Cedric's draws, I think, were a little bit better creature-wise, but the fact that Mani was going to draw everything twice ending up being the more important part.
You had to take a turn off to cast the whip in a lot of spots, and sometimes you don't have a stocked graveyard. And on the other side of the table, it can look like you have a chance to win the game fighting fair, but that's rarely the case. Unless someone really finds nothing at all to do with the whip, the person with the whip is eventually going to take the game over, and a lot of that has to do with the lifelink clause. It just gives you enough of a buffer to generate a graveyard that can start churning out some really good stuff.
And you see here, players both diving into game 3 here. Cedric starting on Sandstep Citadel. Mani fetches into Forest for Elvish Mystic. Mani's deck does have, there's some interesting choices here. Mani's deck does have Elvish Mystics, for example. Cedric's has none. He's playing in the main deck, some cards like Fleece Mane Lion. He actually instead has some Commune with the Gods in his deck. Satyr Wayfinder milling 4 cards, does not find a land. And Mani will start with a Courser of Krufix here, revealing Thoughtseize. Early on, it looks like the advantage is over on Mani's side.
Oh, definitely. Thoughtseize on top. Cedric effectively mulliganing here with that Wayfinder not finding anything. And this Courser might start generating a lot of an advantage here.
Well, good news for Cedric, he has his own Courser. It'll show Hornet Queen, so now we're into those perfect information wars. With this Thoughtseize, Mani will get to know all of Cedric's draws, and he'll get to plan accordingly. Mani +1 card off his Courser, gets Landmore Wastes. Sylvan Caryatid on top, we'll see a Thoughtseize from Mani. Cedric throws down there. Satyr Wayfinder, Hornet Queen, 2 lands. That's going to be an easy choice. It's Hornet Queen, leaving Cedric with virtually 3 lands. Satyr Wayfinder will let him dodge a bad top deck because of that, the Courser of Krufix.
Shows a lot about the power of Hornet Queen here and how slow the matchup is, that Cedric has nothing going on. And
3 lands in play.
Yeah.
It takes a 7-drop.
Over something that can really grease the wheels, like something that can help Cedric get a better graveyard, another land drop.
Cedric is going to get a good land drop here. He drew a land. There was a land on top, not really what he wants to see, but he's going to play it for free with Courser, scry another land to the top, to the bottom, and finally works his way towards Siege Rhino. And look, that's the power of Courser right there, right? Cedric had 3 lands in a row, and after drawing one of them, he was able to get through the other 2 without using another turn.
Yeah, and it makes these mirror matches, the 59th to 60th cards that you add to your deck matter a lot because you see so many cards.
I like that in Cedric's build, especially with those 2 Commune with the Gods too.
Yeah. The 1 Reclamation Sage, the 1 Soul of Innistrad. These are not just incidental one-ups.
Yeah.
Cedric's going to see these in a good portion of his games.
Cedric playing a 1 of a Soul of Innistrad, which is the Black Soul. But speaking of souls, Mani has Soul of Theros hanging out on top of his deck. And right now, if you want to talk about playing a fair game, if Mani just taps out for Soul next turn and Cedric doesn't kill it, which he can't right now, you'll get to see what happens when someone gets to activate Soul of Theros, and that guy ends the game in a hurry.
More importantly, you get to see that Hornet Queen, which is considered to be the best tool that you can have in the mirror match and for fighting this sort of deck, doesn't work anymore.
Right.
They can't block effectively. That's a big deal.
Siege Rhino for Cedric, and there's some bad writing here for him. The next card on top of his deck is Sylvan Caryatid. So he knows Mani has enough mana to cast Soul. He knows Mani's going to get a turn to activate Soul. Cedric has some difficulties here.
Oh, for sure. And Cedric was in the booth with me last week where he got to see what Soul of Theros does to a Hornet Queen.
And Mani draws Soul of Theros. Windswept Heath is going to be another free card for him. And Mani may just have all lands in Soul of Theros here. But that's just fine.
Yeah.
Fetching away that Thoughtseize. Pretty keen there. Mani doesn't really need the Thoughtseize anymore. He knows Cedric's hand, and there's not much to fear in it.
I think that at this point, Mani wants to draw high-impact threats or removal spells. That's what the situation calls for. So,
Yeah. If he knew Cedric had a kill spell waiting in his hand, Mani would probably want the Thoughtseize.
yeah.
But he actually knows from his previous Thoughtseize that Cedric doesn't. So he'll cast Soul of Theros. Doesn't even see his top card yet. But he knows Cedric's... Well, he kind of knows Cedric's top card. Cedric will probably crack this fetch land here to try to get an answer for Soul. A great top of deck for Mani. He's going to get an Utter End next turn. Can Cedric find a removal spell? He needs one soon.
Yep.
Fetches into a basic plains.
Because it's a lot of damage. Soul of Theros is a lot of...
Yes,
it is a lot of damage.
It does not waste time in winning games. Like I said, widely considered in M15 the best rare to open, and because of what it does on creature mirrors, just wrecks them.
Although Cedric there did get the miracle draw there, found an Utter End.
Yeah, and that is the miracle draw. It's not just a hero's downfall. This guy, Utter End, exiles the Soul. And he's going to exile that before Mani ever gets a chance to do something. I would think.
Yeah, and Cedric just churning through his deck right now. Really shows the power of Courser and Scry. They're not blue card drawers. It's not traditional card advantage, but he is getting a lot of selection here.
Doesn't want anything to do with that Soul of Theros. Swings in with Siege Rhino. And now you got to start looking at Mani's life total. He is at 9. He draws Utter End. His hand is 3 lands. Plays a Landmar Wastes off the top. Goes to 10. His next draw will be Murderous Cut, so he does have an answer for Siege Rhino. He also has that Utter End in hand, so 2 kill spells, but no pressure. So you see the clock ticking closer to time in the round. Cedric draws Doomwake Giant. And just as a vanilla 4/6, Doomwake is probably good enough for Cedric.
It's just hard to imagine it carrying the day. It's still probably worth casting at this point, but the beatdowns so rarely are what these games are about.
Yeah. If Cedric is going to end this game in time, though, the beatdowns might be that might be his line.
That is true, yes.
Swing with Siege Rhino. Mani will Utter End it. That guy's exiled. And now we see Doomwake, Satyr Wayfinder hanging in Cedric's hand. He has a 3rd card. I believe it's a Landmar Wastes. We'll start with Satyr Wayfinder, it looks like. Maybe he'll find a different land. You see Whip, Caryatid. This time the Satyr almost bricked a 2nd Wayfinder, but on the last draw he got Landmar Wastes, and Murderous Cut will be his draw for next turn. Play the land he found. That will put him up to 27. And does not cast the Doomwake Giant.
Well, he would be casting it just in the face of a removal spell, and there's nothing, there's nothing else on Cedric's board that warrants a removal spell, so it's very easy for Mani just to kill it straight away. I think that Cedric would rather save it as either an insurance policy against Hornet Queen, or in a scenario where he can chain together multiple enchantments and make some real inroads into Mani's board. But there's not a lot to be gained by just firing it off there in that spot.
Cedric draws Murderous Cut. Murderous Cut's on top. Some danger here. Mani's going to draw Whip of Erebos next turn. You see Cedric check Mani's graveyard. It actually has no creatures in it right now. So it's not a threat yet, but it looks like it can get there. Now, if you're Mani, I don't believe... Mani can't win this in time anymore, I don't think.
I would be surprised, but Cedric at 27.
Cedric's going to scry away that Murderous Cut. He needs a threat. It's going to be Temple of Silence. That does not help, but that was his land for the turn, so he's going to have to draw the Temple. And Mani draws, gets a land, Elvish Mystic on top. No threats for him, but he'll play Whip. Mani's at 11. His creatures have lifelink. Can Cedric win? He'll need a Hornet Queen. Courser swings. Cedric can kill it if he blocks with everybody.
And Cedric always has the out of using his own removal spell in response to removal spell if Mani tries to blow up a triple block here.
Yeah, and I think he'll do it. Mani will murderous cut the one of the cards. Looks like it's going to be the Wayfinder.
And this is the sequence that I was just describing.
Yes.
Mani pulled the trigger on a removal spell here to try to blow up this block, and then Cedric has the out of using his own removal spell to clear everything up.
Mani was killing the Courser, pointing to the Wayfinder there. He was ordering blockers. So yeah, both Coursers died to murderous cuts. Now the top of the decks are not known as we go into extra turns.
And now, Cedric still has some, I guess, extremely slim chance of being able to generate a win here.
Yeah, he's got a Temple as his first draw. Doomwake Giants in his hand. He can Doomwake. At this point, he may Doomwake to kill the Elvish Mystic. He's gotten the removal spell out of Mani's hand. I think he has to, just because of how few turns he has to win.
It just depends if you feel, I guess at this point, Cedric basically has the draw sewn up as the floor, so he can try to get greedy and go for a win.
Yeah, I don't think there's much risk in it. He looks at Mani's graveyard. Scryed another Temple of Silence to the bottom. His last card is Doomwake Giant. Mani's hand, I believe, all lands at this point.
Yeah.
But he does have that Whip of Erebos in play. And maybe it's not Doomwake Giant time. He's going to just swing the two Zeta Wayfinders. Mani will trade. What do you think he's holding the Doomwake for?
I'm guessing for Hornet Queen.
Okay. Mani draws for turn. He's going to whip back that Courser. Gets to look at his top card, maybe net a land. Doesn't, but it's Siege Rhino. That's not good for Cedric. Sandstep Citadel now out of Mani's hand. He'll gain a life. And with Siege Rhino on top, sometimes in these situations one player is dead but not dead. And this game still pretty even. It's hard to say who's going to win it. Turn 3 goes back to Cedric.
I think if it played out to its natural conclusion, I think Cedric would be slightly disadvantaged, but not in an insurmountable way.
I mean, give me a draw of Utter End from Cedric, and now he's advantaged.
Exactly. So we're not talking about very much that has to happen here.
He'll pass back. Turn 4 from Mani. His last draw of the match is Siege Rhino. Steals 3 life. Doomwake Giant, the top card. And lands from Cedric. So that'll be it. That'll be a draw between the two.
Welcome back, Cedric. A little round 1 draw.
Siege Rhino, everybody.
Yep. Settling for a long one. So not that much of a surprise. The Obzon Reanimator matchup ends in a draw round 1.
Yeah. And it will be a bit of an uphill climb for both of them. Neither of them can be particularly excited about getting into the straw bracket in round 1. Like you said, there's going to be a lot of Obzon Reanimator or Sidisi or the Sultai Reanimator decks.
Yeah,
here.
you're going to be playing against a lot more Whip of Erebos, most likely. Although, for Cedric at least, it's good for him to get some reps in that round. He's touching the deck for the first time. There were some instances where, what land drop does he want to make for the turn? Took him a little while to figure out.